Hi, everyone. Ooh, mic's working. So cool. Um, cool. So today we're going to be talking about scaling a mission-driven startup from 50 to 1,000 people, and going into two things in a bit of detail. One is a bit about TransferWise and how we grow, and then I'm going to share with you some of the stuff I've learned on the journey over the last 4 years I've been there. So firstly, a little bit, what I like to do with these presentations is say the answer at the beginning rather than wait all the way through to the end. So how TransferWise grows is around having a 10x better product and cause-driven marketing, and that drives word-of-mouth growth. So now I'm going to backtrack and try and explain to you a little bit around where that comes from. Before that, first introductions. I'm Nilan. I look after our product and marketing teams at TransferWise. Been there 4 years. And a little on TransferWise. How many people have heard of TransferWise in the audience? Cool. You can see the 6 people from TransferWise raising up their hands. Awesome. And a few others. So TransferWise, like all startups, has got a kind of an apocryphal founding story. You know, like our one's actually true. And most startups start to solve a problem that the founders have. And the problem that our founders had was when they sent money internationally, it cost a hell of a lot. So on the left-hand side there, you can see Christo. He was living in London, and he was sending his savings home to Estonia. And every time he sent his savings, say he sent £1,000 over to Estonia, the bank would take £50 as a fee. On the flip side, and that's quite a lot of money. On the flip side, you got Tarvet on the right. He was actually living in Estonia and paying for a mortgage in London. And every time he sent £1,000 over, the bank took a £50 fee. And they met each other at a party, and they were complaining about this, and they came up with this really neat idea that meant they both could save money, which was instead of each of them sending money across borders, Tarvet started paying money into Christo's savings account, and Christo started paying Tarvet's mortgage, and that way they both saved £50 each, and they both got £100. It's pretty cool. So that was the first version of TransferWise. There's literally not one line of code written, and it got to delivering customer value pretty fast. The second version of TransferWise was a Skype chat. So this worked so well, they created a Skype chat, and they invited all their friends who wanted to send euros to GBP and GBP to euros, and they matched them up. And that worked really well. And then you fast forward to today, and we're moving billions of pounds around the world. And the fun thing is, the way we do it is still very much based on that same principle of people matching with other people around the world, and no money ever crossing a border. With our borderless bank account, we launched about 9 months ago. You can now also receive money as well as spend money internationally. So some stats, we're now moving more than £2 billion a month, saving our customers £3 million a day, with about 30 price drops we've made in the last 9 months. We've got over 4 million customers worldwide now, and over 2 million card transactions have happened since launch. More than 1,000 people now globally working at TransferWise, and being profitable for 2 years. But the bit I'm most proud of is this green line here. So the blue line is actually based on real data, and it looks like what our user growth looks like. The green line's a bit illustrative, but it's kind of illustrating the number of users that joined us after hearing about TransferWise from a friend. So 80% of the people that joined TransferWise last month found out about TransferWise from a friend. And we call that evangelism, customer evangelism. We spent a lot of time trying to use that as a principal driver of our growth. And to do that, we kind of got pretty deep into why do people recommend our product. How many people in the audience have heard about or know what NPS is? Okay, cool. So I can whiz through this. So NPS is a pretty neat way of trying to understand why people are recommending your product. You kind of ask your customers this question: would you recommend us to your friends? And you give them a 10-point scale. People that give you a 9 or a 10, you call them promoters. You kind of assume that they go around telling everyone, you've got to use TransferWise because it's pretty awesome. And then there are people who give you a 1 to 6 on the scale. You call them detractors. And the assumption is, and the theory is, they go around telling everyone, don't use TransferWise. And then the 7 and 8s, they're neutrals. They're kind of like meh. It didn't really make that much of a difference to my life. And you calculate NPS by taking the number of detractors away from promoters and expressing it as a percentage. It's kind of a neat thing because you can do it for your for other people, so for your competitors' customers, or for an entire industry. So, for example, the financial services industry's NPS is minus 30%. It's not surprising, really. The travel industry is 0%. And Google's is about 70%. Ours is 86%. It's pretty crazy high. So I'll talk through a little now around why we think NPS is important to growth. So as a phenomenon we observed in our data pretty early on, that as you move people up the NPS scale, they tell more people about TransferWise. So when you move somebody from a 5 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10 on the NPS scale, they literally double the number of people they tell. An 8 to a 9, they double again. A 9 to a 10, it's not that much difference. Now, if you take a step back and think like, if you, what the impact of moving NPS by 10% is and what that looks like is pretty dramatic. So imagine this is your business, and you've acquired some customers, and every month you're churning a few of them. And then you acquire a few new customers on the left here, and you've given them such a great experience that they tell one other person, who tells another person, who tells another person. Now imagine you increase the NPS, then the rate at which the growth happens, it kind of accelerates like that. And there isn't much that has that kind of dramatic effect on your growth rate. If you move conversion rate by 10%, you get like a one-off hit on conversion. If you increase the average transaction value by 5%, you'll get a little fillip of growth there. But if you move NPS, you increase the virality of every customer going through your product, and that kind of gift keeps on giving and giving and giving, and leads to these graphs that look pretty awesome. It's also pretty logical. Like, if you have more people promoting your product than detracting your product, then you're going to grow. And if you can figure out how to get people to promote your product, then obviously, then growth is going to take care of itself. But there's a reason why everyone doesn't do this. So I'll try talking through what we've learned about this. So when you build a product for the first time and you get it working, like, you're pretty proud that it works without bugs. And most people kind of stop here. A few people go a bit further. They iron out those bugs. They work through the significant issues. And most businesses stop at the level of kind of like optimizing the conversion rate, making the experience really slick. But if you're going to move NPS, what you've got to do is kind of create an experience that your customer didn't believe was previously possible. And that's the kind of culture you need to create in the product organization in order to create that kind of movement in NPS and then therefore that kind of growth. So let's dive a little more into the reasons, just very specifically at TransferWise, that we've learned why people recommend the product and what are the things that we need to do so much better for our customers. So through talking to customers, as well as analyzing NPS, we've kind of seen there's two broad reasons that people recommend our product. Very rational reasons, where they talk about the product, and emotional, softer ones, where they talk about our mission. On the product side, they say stuff like, you've got to use TransferWise because it's fast. You've got to use TransferWise because it's cheap, because it's easy to use. Price, speed, ease of use. We call those our product pillars. The cool thing with these things is we can measure them. And what we see when we enter a market is in order to get advocacy and crazy, explosive word-of-mouth growth, we need to be 10 times better than the alternative in the market. So think about it. If a bank charges 5% to move money internationally, if we charged 4.8, you might use us, but you wouldn't tell anyone about us. But banks charge 5%, we charge 0.3. So if you're sending £1,000, you save £47. So you do that twice, 3 times, 4 times, you've got almost £200. And you start telling people not to use TransferWise, but to not use their bank anymore. With speed now, something like 30% of our transfers last quarter happened instantly, literally settle instantly. But the fun thing with this is we're not sitting there internally dropping the price by 1% and seeing if we get more than 1% more customers. We're actually we're actually dropping price and making the payments instant because that's just the right thing to do. And that brings us back to the mission side of why people recommend us. So we have this concept internally that we developed over the last couple of years that we consider ourselves to be a mission-driven startup. And what I mean by that is the organization is a catalyst for achieving our mission. Our mission is kind of to take price, speed, and ease of use all the way through to their theoretical maximums. So the price of a money transfer is just moving ones and zeros from one database to another. That can go to literally almost zero. Speed can go to almost instant. And convenience can go to almost frictionless. And our organization is a catalyst for achieving that change in the world. Our customers see our authenticity in trying to achieve that mission, and they try to help us do that as well. We didn't always think our customers cared about the mission. We thought they just wanted cheap transfers. And then about 3 years ago, we sent this email out to our customer base. And we sent this email out when we launched our new flag logo. And this email was our most successful marketing email that we'd ever sent. So note, it hasn't got any imagery on it. It hasn't got any discounts on it. It hasn't even got a price on it. Hasn't got a call to action. But it just talked about what our internal mission was. And we didn't expect it to resonate as strongly with our customer base as it did. So they forwarded it on to their friends. And why? Was because they hadn't seen a financial services organization that was trying this hard to create a new, fairer way of moving money. So back to then, so how does TransferWise grow? So it's about having this 10 times better product, 10 times better on price, speed, ease of use, and this mission. So you put these two things together, you get this explosive word-of-mouth growth. So let's go into a little bit more detail on the product side and the people side around how we actually make that happen. How do you build a 10 times better product? What does that mean internally? So this is my grand unified theory of growth, or GUT. So again, I'll talk through the summary at the beginning. So there's four learnings on product-led growth. So the first one is product solves all problems. 2 is build a 10 times better product. 3 is qualitative beats quantitative. And 4 is product growth is people growth. So, okay, hopefully I've piqued your interest with these 4. So step through each of them. So there's this Silicon Valley saying that growth solves all problems. And I've definitely seen this firsthand over the years. So when VCs say that, or startups say growth solves all problems, what they mean is when you're growing, people want to give you money. When you're growing, people want to join you. When you're growing, you generally you could be profitable if you wanted to and generate cash. So growth is pretty awesome, and so people try to figure out how to solve for growth. The problem is how do you solve for growth? So I've been there. TransferWise at the beginning, or at points in time where our growth flatlines for 6 months, 9 months. And you're left with a few different options for what you could do. You could, I'm just going to flick ahead, just to, actually, go back to this one here. Yes, you could panic when this is happening, or you could try to double down on product. So I'll try and talk through how to double down on product. So what normally happens in the business is that you kind of obsess, when you're worried about growth and you know growth solves is going to solve everything for you, you double down on the business outcomes that you're trying to solve. You're like, you know what, we need to have a plan for revenue. We need to have a plan for user growth. So the trick isn't to focus on those. The trick is to focus instead on creating value for customers. In every single company I've ever worked in prior to TransferWise, there was this list of things that you had to do to make money, and there was this list of things you had to do to make your customers happy. And we'd inevitably always end up doing the things that made us money. So the cool thing that we managed to do at TransferWise is we only have one list of things, and it's the list of things that make our customers happy. And I'll try and explain how that ends up to great business outcomes. So if instead of creating plans for business outcomes, you create a plan for customer outcomes, you basically end up with incredible business outcomes. So this is, so let's just go through the life cycle of a startup on the growth side. So you start off at the beginning when you're not really growing, and you have a whole set of challenges around what I call getting to traction. I've got a presentation on this. If you Google, you can find it, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk more about this bit here, when you're starting to grow, and more specifically, when the growth starts slowing down. So every single product has an S-curve that looks like this. Has this theory of diffusion that kind of explains that as a product gets distributed into a market, it starts accelerating as it goes through product market fit, and then as it reaches saturation, the growth rate starts decelerating. So the bit I'm talking about now is really focusing on is when the deceleration starts happening, what do you do? So one is, as I said earlier, you could panic. The other thing that's very common is people start doubling down on marketing in a big way. And marketing is pretty awesome. That's a marketing stunt that we did in the UK a few years ago. But marketing hits diminishing returns over time. So as you spend ever more money on marketing, you get ever less growth off the back of it. So it's not really a panacea. New products is when people start from I need to grow, and you've exhausted the marketing route, then the other avenue people explore is launching new products. I have a friend of mine who runs growth at Uber, and he describes trying to solve the growth problem through launching a new product as capturing lightning in a bottle again. So imagine you built this amazing product, it's got to product market fit and it's growing, and then you're going to try to do that all over again. It's like fiendishly difficult to do. So the final way in which you can grow, and the one that I've seen us exploit the most valuably, is instead of doing all those things, just keeping on doubling down on solving our core problem even better. And I'll try and explain how that helps growth. Helps customer outcomes, and leads to that kind of explosive word-of-mouth growth. So back to this graph. So one way to think about this is on the left-hand side, just back to my word-of-mouth model I was talking through earlier. You've kind of got people telling other people about the product, and they keep telling more and more other people about the product, and they can find people to tell, and these people want to switch and use the product. And then over here, they find less and less people to tell, and those people are converting less and less. So what's happening is what we call the virality of the product is decreasing. So just talk through a little model, a way I've learned to think about this graph. So really, what this graph should look like is, I think, like this, where you've got the total addressable market and then how you've been growing over time. And then really, when I think about all the work our product managers, our engineers, our analysts do, it's trying to figure out how to move this line up. Okay. And if I look at our growth rates, you kind of see it starts slowing down, and then we release something, and the growth rate shifts up. And the growth rate shifts up because we dropped the price, or we made the payments faster, or we figured out how to remove a verification step for our Singaporean customers. And as a consequence, and what happens is there were people who previously didn't use us because we were too expensive or too difficult to use that do use us. Or there are people that start using us that are much more wowed about the experience than they were previously, and therefore more likely to tell people about TransferWise. So one kind of big lever of growth is focusing on improving your product's core parameters. For us, it's price, speed, ease of use. The other one, obviously, is increasing the size of the total addressable market. And we do this as well. You'd launch in a new country. You'd make the product available for businesses. So these two things are the things that kind of keep you riding the growth curve to keep the product growing into, and keeps pushing back the decelerating effects. Okay, so that kind of covered the first bit. So product solves all problems, and you can get these awesome business outcomes by doubling down on product. But let's go a little bit deeper. Like, how on earth do you build a product that's 10 times better? Like money transfer is one of the oldest industries. It's been going since the Medicis in 17th century Florence. How could a couple of Estonian guys figure out how to move money for 10 times cheaper than anyone else had ever done before? So I'll try and talk through some of our learnings on that. So what does it mean if you're building a 10 times better product? So it means you're building a product that doesn't exist, right? It actually means you're building a product that may never exist. And as I like to tell our product teams, if you're not living in that state of existential crisis where you're not building something that the world has never seen before, then you're not really trying hard enough, right? But it's that kind of dynamic and culture that creates this product that's much, much better than anything else in the market. And I'll talk through 2 examples of how we've done that. So one's Singapore. We went to the government of Singapore 3 years ago, and we asked them for a license so we could offer the people of Singapore fast, cheap money transfers. And they said, sure thing, but you're going to have to meet every single customer face-to-face before you take their money. And we said, we're familiar with global anti-money laundering regulations, and you don't need to physically meet people. You can take a copy of their ID, and which has already been kind of biometrically identified, and we could use that as a proof of ID. And Singaporean government said, no, if you want to send money out of Singapore, you're going to have to meet every customer face-to-face before you accept the transfer. So what do we do? So we had 4,000 customers on the wait list, and what we did was we sent a small verification team out to Singapore, and they started verifying those customers in Singapore. And our customers hated it, so you kind of went through the app, and at the end of the process, you got an email inviting you for an appointment to go and meet Jack in the verification team, and he'd look at your documents and verify you, and then you'd be able to set up and do a transfer. But what we did was, behind the scenes, was we started lobbying the government to change the law. So this cool thing is that payment systems are usually owned by governments, and governments usually are appointed by people. And so we got our customers to complain to the government to update the anti-money laundering laws in Singapore, as well as putting a lot of soft pressure on the government to change the law as well. And after a year of lobbying, so this was 3 years of work, we got the world's first license to do electronic KYC in Singapore. So that's a long story, but that is a 10 times better product. When we started on that journey, we had no idea if we were ever going to get the ability to have a product where you didn't need to do face-to-face verification. But and the product team, as it was working through that, really didn't know how long it was going to take, but that's kind of how you build a 10 times better product. The other example I touch on is we're the only non-bank that has a bank account at the Bank of England. Again, we kicked off that process 5 years ago, and having a bank account at the Bank of England enables us to have the fastest and cheapest payments in and out of the UK. Okay, number 3 learning. Qual beats quant. So I did a maths degree, and one of my biases is that I'm a little bit too quant, and that can be a bit dangerous in product. And I've learned over time that the qualitative side of product is actually can be a lot more valuable to explore than the quantitative side. And I'll try explaining a bit about that. I actually wrote a blog post on this, which you can Google, have a look at afterwards. But in that blog post, there's a little story about a product manager. I'm going to call her Lily. So Lily joined TransferWise. She was the product manager for the Refer a Friend team. And so you can imagine we had an incentivized referral program where we gave customers a small cash reward if they referred some of their friends. And she joined, and after a quarter, I was sitting with her and I asked her, so Lily, what's your plan for next quarter? And she said, I'm going to test everything. I say, what do you mean? Because I'm literally going to do everything. I'm going to change the incentives, I'm going to change the email, I'm going to change the subject line, I'm going to change the words on the landing page, I'm going to split test everything. And I said, so I challenged her back. I said, what happens if I said you've got 2 weeks and you have to figure out which one thing out of all those things is worth doing? How would you do it? And we talked through it, and she said, I'm going to go talk to customers. So she literally talked and talked and talked to customers. So she came back to me and she said, actually, the biggest problem our customers have is this. And she solved that, and she went from problem to problem. But this is a very common way of working I see in startups, where I call it the experiment factory approach, where you don't really value getting to a softer qualitative insight on what matters to customers. And really, you just throw spaghetti at the wall and try and see what sticks. And that approach takes a very long time to get to work because of how long it takes to get to statistical significance and stuff. But also, it weakens the muscle you could build on building a stronger empathy for your customer base. So that was number 3. Yep, qual beats quant. And finally, number 4, product growth equals people growth. So we've kind of been on a journey so far where I've kind of talked through kind of almost theoretically the things we focus on that drive our growth. I haven't really talked much about people. So this is the bit where I share what I've learned about kind of the people side of product. So yeah, for lots of the last 4 years at TransferWise, the new user graph looked like this. And some points in time, we were like doubling the number of new users every 6 months. At some points, we were doubling the number of new users every 3 months. Right, take a step back. And imagine you had 1,000 new customers 1 month. Then 3 months later, you have 2,000. That means you have 2,000 the number of support contacts. You have twice the number of support contacts, twice the amount of payments to link and sort out, twice the amount of fraud to work through. So really, you need to double your team. Let's call it the transactional teams that scale with volume and new users. And actually, if you're going to double like the customer support team, you need to double the recruiting team because they need to recruit those people. You need to double the HR team, and you need to double the finance team. But so the thing I've observed is you can't do that, right? So our growth rate is going driven by NPS, and our customers are going around telling everyone you've got to use TransferWise, and it's off there accelerating. And in the background, you've got these recruiters and these team leads trying to hire people to keep up with demand. And what happens inevitably is they can't. And as these lines diverge, what I like to say is that our probability of fucking up increases, right? And you kind of see it, right? So you see like the queue lengths in customer support get longer and longer. It takes longer to respond to emails and to calls. Payments take longer to go through. Speed goes down. Customer satisfaction drops, and NPS drops. When that happens, the growth rate slows down. So that was pretty interesting for me. And so I've seen this happen a number of times over the last 4 years. And so that kind of helped me get my head around, really, this top-level growth rate doesn't really matter. Because the underlying growth rate it reverts to over time is the rate at which you can grow your team, and the limiting factor at which the factors that limit the rate at which you can grow the team. But it's not as easy as that either. So I think in the last 12 months, we've probably added 100 engineers to kind of doubled our engineering team, more than doubled our engineering team in a year. And yeah, so we're growing at the rate we're hiring and onboarding those engineers to have an impact. But it turns out you just can't double the engineering team or double the CS team. You need to double the number of leaders you've got in the organization that are capable of onboarding those engineers and customer support agents and operations executives into the team. And if you don't do that, you end up with a bunch of people that are confused and need support, and there aren't enough leaders or people who've been around a little bit longer that can help these people. And again, you end up with this gap. Let's call it the leadership debt gap. And over time, again, that will lead to instability, people leaving, people not being happy, and again, the growth rate slowing down a bit. And again, you fix it and you move on. Which kind of got me to this conclusion that, we started off talking about growth, and we talked about price, speed, ease of use, and making, building a 10x better product and all that kind of good stuff. But really, all that really matters is the rate at which you hire and grow leaders in the organization so they can support people in having an impact. Okay, so that's it from me. Those are the four learnings. Product solves all problems. Build a 10x product if you can. Qual beats quant. And product growth is equivalent to people growth. Just to wrap up, we're hiring. It's a cool little hiring video that we launched, was it this week? That's me, actually, trying to learn how to surf and failing. And we've got a stand around the corner if any of you are interested in joining. But that's it. We've got time for some questions, I think, if anyone's got any. Thank you. Ooh. Cool. Do you want me to go through them from the top? Yeah, cool, all right. So the first, all are anonymous. Okay, cool. So the first one, how can you make sure that you stay mission-driven while hiring people with such space? So by inventing the words mission-driven is the answer. So probably 3 years ago, I got really worried that we were getting focused on revenue and profit. So I kind of made up these words that we're a mission-driven company. And everything I said earlier, and the objective of the company is to be a catalyst to achieve the mission. And I went around and kept saying this to people till I believed it and everyone else started believing it. And it's amazing. I think today when we do our employee surveys and stuff, people genuinely really believe that they come to work to achieve the mission, and that's what the organization is there for. So the first point is that we deliberately emphasize it internally, the mission. We talk very little about profitability and revenue. We talk much more about savings and impact on customers than anything else. So I guess it's really about walking the walk on this stuff. Next question. What type of organization changes did you need to do in order to successfully grow? That's a really good question. Yeah, I'll try answering it. So when I joined TransferWise, there were 2 teams. So very small, there were 60 people. There was team grow quickly, and there was team, I used to call it don't fuck up. So one team was doing the payments and answering the phones, and the other team was trying to do stuff that helped you grow. And then over time, we found we could split this kind of grow quickly team into a team looking at trying to understand why would somebody use us and switch to us, and focused on conversion, a team focused on the experience, a team focused on refer a friend, etc. And so we broke down into a bunch of central teams around core product problems. So that was kind of the second phase of TransferWise. The third one was we launched our first regional team in the US about 2 years ago. And we started then, now we've got regional teams in every region around the world. So now we have central teams, regional teams, and then finally the third kind of team we added about a year and a half ago were customer segment teams. So like our business team and our high value team that look at specific customer segments. Cool, I hope that answered that question. Next, do you have a problem with letting new joiner leaders do their job without micromanaging them? Should ask the new joiner leaders that question. I think my personal problem and the organization's problem is we don't micromanage enough. Meaning, so I've never made a decision in product in terms of, I think we should select Zendesk as our tool for our customer support center, or I think we should do X or Y, and neither has Christo or Tarvet ever made a decision. And so the organization is much more around creating an environment in which product leaders and product managers can make decisions themselves. That presents its own challenges, though. So I don't think we've got a problem there, more an opportunity. Cool. What is the biggest threat to TransferWise as a business? Great question. Generally, internally, we don't worry that much about competition. And that is perceived sometimes as being arrogant. But it's really because we kind of know what we need to do. We need to drop price. We need to make the payments faster. We need to make it easier to use. And if anyone does that faster than us, then we've got a problem. So really, the biggest threat is our speed of execution on this stuff. Cool. How does your product organization look like? I think I've covered that. Which is harder, growing the team from 10 to 100 or 100 to 1,000? God, it's good questions. So I had that one before. So it's just the problems change. So when we were like 10 people, I keep thinking back because I had so much time. Right? You could like literally go around and talk to everyone in the organization. And now I'm lucky if I talk to 100, 150, 200 people out of 1,000 in a year, right? So that's pretty crazy. When we're smaller, you could like change the culture very quickly and move the organization very quickly in a direction. Now it's much slower. On the flip side, I think we're much more mission-driven now than we were back then. There we were really young. We didn't have a mission. We didn't know where we were going. A lot of this stuff wasn't figured out yet. So we're much more alignment now than we used to do. So the problems change, I guess, is the answer to that one. And finally, how many businesses do you think can realistically build a 10 times better product? Doesn't that require a specific environment? It's a great question. So we share a little story. So we've got an SEO team at TransferWise, and it's kind of like a growth-focused team. So it's like, where am I going to find more traffic on Google? And one of the places it found traffic on Google was people looking for currency converters. So they're like, let's build another currency converter. And I never forget the conversation between Christo, CEO, and Fab, who's SEO director. Chris was like, why do you want to build another currency converter? Like, there's hundreds of currency converters on the internet, right? Like, life's pretty short, dude. Do something with your life that's a bit more meaningful than that, right? And we ended up building something I won't go into, but a comparison tool that helps customers compare exchange rates, which doesn't exist on the internet at all. So, yeah, I wouldn't focus on the 10x bit. I'd focus on, like, we can all work on like optimization problems, making things slightly better, or we could try to, on the flip side, we could try to create value by solving a really big unsolved problem in the world. And that's probably a better use of our time and our energy. My God, all right, another question. What's the ratio between developers and the rest, I guess, of the org? I don't know. So I think we've got about 200, in product engineering, we're about 300 people. There's about 220, 30 of them are engineers. The remainder are product managers, designers, and analysts. Okay, cool. I'll be around if you've got any other questions and you want to chat further. But thanks very much for your time.